we've got the author of The Making of Tomb Raider, Daryl Baxter. So come on, Daryl. Don't be shy. We have Gavin Romery. Here he is. Heather Stevens. Is she coming? There she is. She's coming. It's quite a long way when you think about it. We have Peter Barnard. Hey, there he is. And finally, you've heard from her already, but we'll bring her back out again. Judith Gibbons. This is cosy. So, why don't we introduce ourselves and say what your roles were now and what the roles were at Core Design.
Do we need to use them?
No, we should be good. Can you hear Gavin?
Hello?
Yeah, we're all good. So you go first.
All right, well, my name's Daryl, I wrote the book, so, and it was a passion project of 9 months during the first lockdown, and I got to speak to these lovely people and a lot of others as well.
Cool. I'm Gavin Romery. I was one of the programmers on the original game and lead programmer on the second one. Next.
Yes, Heather Gibson, and I was one of the level designers on Tomb Raider 1 and 2. And I'm just looking for my daughter actually, because I don't know if she knows.
She's over there.
She's got me.
Hi, I'm Peter Barnard. I was a cinematic artist on the first game and several of the other ones after that.
And finally,
Hi, I'm Judith Gibbons and I voice Lara for Tomb 2 and Tomb 3.
excellent. So we'll be passing questions around, but we'll start with you, Daryl. And I think the question I sort of had was like, why now? Why not 5 years ago for the 20th anniversary? What was special about 25 years to make this book?
Well, I think a part of it was the fact that, I mean, I didn't really know whether, there was an appetite for a book really about it, like for the 20th anniversary, because, we had the amazing, like the sweet Nathan McCree, and a couple of years after we had the Dark Angel Symphony as well. And I thought for the 25th, it would be a great thing just to kind of like honour, who had made the game and who was no longer with us either. And when the pandemic hit, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go for it and pitch it, and it got accepted. And after a very intense 9 months, here we are.
And I guess something which is quite interesting is that it's all your own sources. Like this was, you've not used as a wealth of information on the internet about it. But so what was important about doing that? Why not? I would say why not go to Wikipedia? But who does that? But why not use a different source, for example?
I think the main thing is because, I'm a journalist in my day job anyway, Tech Radar, so I always interview people. So I always wanted to talk to, everyone just for the, the whole story, because that's what this is. It's a story about how the first 2 games were made by the original team. And I wanted to reach out to everyone I could to just get their perspective on what happened, how it happened, and what really happened as well. It was really important to me.
And I guess for our people here, like what led you to Core? Because I guess that's part of the story as well. It's your story. So how did we all start at Core Design?
So mine was, I was finishing at university and trying to decide what to do next. And as a programmer, I had a choice. I could either go into a regular programming job, go and work for some, programming company, or do what I did most of the time, which was play games. So I thought, well, I'll give it, stick CVs in both directions. And Core Design was one of the ones that invited me to interview. In fact, I went to Gremlin Graphics up in Sheffield on the same day. They just locked me in a room with one guy who just went, yeah, you'll be programming leaderboards. And I was like, can I look around? No, you can come back for another interview. And it's like, oh, okay, that's a bit rubbish. Then I went to Core and they showed me around the whole building. Went, oh yeah, you'll be able to make your own game. I thought, that sounds good. So I accepted that job. Didn't turn out to be true, of course, but got to work on Tomb Raider, which was a pretty good start in the industry. So.
Not bad. Go on, Heather.
Yeah, so I'd already worked at Rare for sort of 5 or 6 years on 8-bit, moving over to 16-bit Nintendo games, which were all very family orientated. And I was made redundant from Rare and thinking that was the worst point of my life, really, and nobody would want me. And literally saw an ad, I think, called, we're advertising in a local magazine, and picked up the phone, and Jeremy literally said to me over the phone, can you come up tomorrow for an interview? And I think if I'd have left him to speak any longer, he'd have said, and do you want the job? So he's very much an open door policy. I arrived about a year before Gavin. I think I'd worked on one game at Core, which was Skeleton Crew. And I do remember when Gavin turned up, because Jeremy introduced him as a rocket scientist from Cambridge, I think. So there was a healthy mix of different kind of people there. So university grads and people like myself that had really just self-trained. We were arty kids who became interested in doing something in art. But in the late 80s, early 90s, there weren't any sort of college courses that you could go on. So you literally walked into most development studios with a portfolio, if it had character designs in there or comic designs or something that geared slightly towards computer games, it tended to turn the heads of the bosses, and you were pretty much allowed at least a chance of seeing if you could work in that environment. And some people did. Some people could work there for years and carry on in the computer games industry, but some people from a graphics point of view or a fine art point of view just couldn't make that transition from drawing to computer games, to working on a computer. But I found it very, very sort of easy to do, and ended up staying in the industry for something like 12, 13 years, and then had a child and left. So there's my whole life story.
So I, probably a bit similar to Gavin, I had recently left university, and I'd done very kind of traditional art and design, and I'd got into computer graphics then, and I thought, actually, if I'm trying to go down a fine art route, I'm going to have to probably change what I do to make a living. And I thought maybe that should become my hobby, and the computer graphics thing's the thing I should move into. And I think it was that time when The Edge magazine, I think it was literally issue 3, I thought, this looks amazing now, games, they've got CDs and things. And suddenly graphics had changed enormously. I thought, oh, this could be a great time to get involved in this, because things are really changing, and maybe I've got some of those skills. So I spent a bit of time, learnt a bit about video editing, to make a show reel, because you had to send a VHS tape of your work in those days. I guess most people probably don't know what a VHS tape is, but anyway, it was a very important thing. And I like Gavin, I think I applied all over the place because The Edge was just full. That was the bit I loved about it. It was just full of jobs at the back of it. And I also went for an interview at Gremlin, and they actually showed me around, Gav.
Oh, well, I guess you're obviously special.
Classy man.
But yeah, I ended up at Core. Ironically, I work for I guess an offshoot of that is I work for Sumo Digital now, so it kind of came full circle. But yeah, I went to Core, and something just clicked, and met the team there. And I think I probably joined, maybe 5 weeks before you. I think we were like,
yeah,
you and
very
Neil
close,
were like the
You
new
were
people
together.
all at the same
Yeah,
time.
because Neil was the same time as us, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how I got into games.
And I guess Judith, we did hear it earlier, but we can say it again. So, like, how did you get the role of Lara in the second game?
My brother Martin, I think you all know now, that he was one of the programmers, wasn't he, working at Core, and he said, they're looking for a voice for a female character in a computer game. And so I went down for the audition, but since reading the book a little bit, there was 10 of us, I think. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that, actually.
No.
Did you know that I'd done some as well? But I just couldn't shake my Brummie accent. So some of
yes,
That would have been a whole
in-game,
different outcome, wouldn't it?
the
I think
in-game
it was,
stuff, a lot of that's me.
yeah.
But I couldn't scream because Martin was saying to me, we had such a laugh actually recording the whole thing. But I couldn't scream because I've never been a girly screamer. And I think when they realised the best I could do was kind of, they thought, right, we need some real help here. Yeah, we need somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I didn't know what it was all about, really.
No.
Don't know what. Just read a few lines, and redid it a little bit softer and a bit higher, and then and I got it. So yeah.
There we go. I think something which I quite found interesting in the book, we're not going to spoil too much of it for you, there's plenty of chapters, was like Toby's pitch. So the first time you saw T-Rex, I guess. So, and I guess for those who joined later, it'd be good to sort of hear what your experience was. But you were there, you there, Heather, when that big presentation happened?
It's the funniest thing because I've racked my brain and I can't remember the big presentation that everybody talks about, and that's because Toby had already come to Core with the idea of Tomb Raider, and some people might know that, might not. At the time, I think BC Races was where he was pushed with Jeremy, wasn't he? He wanted a racing game, a cute racing game. So Toby and Paul, being the newbies, that was their year of proving themselves with a game that Jeremy already had in mind. But Toby's original was a top-down PC game that I saw as a demo, and I think it was the demo that he showed in his interview to Jeremy, if I'm correct. And it was basically a Prince of Persia style 2D version of Prince of Persia, but top-down. So it was very strange. You could see the character dropping, and then I think he dropped the camera angle and pulled it round, and then you could see him flip into a ledge, climbing up, and then the camera would pan back down to above, and you'd see the character running. So it was semi-3D. He got the 3D in his head, but it was having the technology to actually create a game like that. And in all honesty, I think that year's break of doing the BC Racers game was the time that he had to think more about his baby, basically, which was the Tomb Raider concept. And even when he first started, so you finished a game in Core and you were kind of allowed to have a bit of a breather and play around at your own game ideas. Nobody was coming to you and saying, you've got to do this game or we got that game. And you usually had sort of between 3 and 6 months before they got bored of you, didn't they, to at least show something, to show an idea. And Toby'd already started rendering stuff in 3D Max, which was a relatively new piece of software for all of us. So we were literally learning 3D Max with manuals because there was no YouTube videos or specialists coming into the building. So you sat through these great big manuals to learn how to build in 3D. I'm sort of on page 50, and I think Toby'd read 3 volumes of it and created an Egyptian tomb in literally a fortnight, you know. And that was that look at what Tomb Raider could be.
Right.
But the reality of creating something in 3ds Max, which was really designed for the film industry, and putting that into games was the big jump where Gav really came in and he bridged that need to have a piece of technology that could create what Toby envisaged to what the artist could actually use and build a game with.
Right.
So the in-house editor was the key to that. But really, just getting back to what was the big promotional thing that they had with Jeremy, it kind of slipped in a little bit, didn't it, Gav, from my imagination? We had one great big meeting at Core at Bredzel, and Jeremy had come back from a trip to Japan. I think he'd spoken to somebody at Sony or America, and he'd already seen what Toby was working on. I was trying to render wireframe landscapes and things which were taking forever to render. I know I feel like that, actually. Taking forever to render, and then once Gav got his foot in the door and we could actually put a few pieces together, he could see what we were trying to do. But it was by no means set in stone. I mean, even the Lara Croft thing, Jeremy was adamant he wanted a male character, which is pretty much well known now, but at the time, just allowing Toby to focus on what he wanted to do was the best thing really that Jeremy could have done, because that's how we ended up with Lara Croft and Tomb Raider.
Yeah, and
so there wasn't that interference. That's what I'm trying to say. There was no big, this is the presentation, and Jeremy going, this is what we want. It was all very, very
like a showcase, I guess.
natural.
It's just like, this is something.
Yeah, we tidied it up enough so that the execs knew where we were going with it at that stage. But that's as close to a presentation as we could get. But I think where you refer to the T-Rex thing was, the T-Rex was something that Sony had put together as a demo, and I think for some reason Toby may have seen that, and he's not here to speak for himself, but it might have just stuck in his head that, you know, that was a pretty cool thing to see in the Sony demo, and we're going to use that in the game.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that's going to please Sony.
What do you think, Gavin?
She's finished, and
I think so.
I don't know.
I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah,
Oh, dear. Should we go home?
Really,
Right, thank you, everybody.
Don't need to read the book anymore.
No. Paragraph 5.
Oh dear, well, I can't even remember what the bloody question was.
What did you first think?
Presentation.
Well, no,
Oh, okay.
in general,
Okay, cool.
like when you came to Core and it's like,
Yeah.
right, Gavin, you're working on this. What did you think of that first sort of glimpse of what Tomb Raider could be?
Yeah, so, well, I think I've told this story so many times now. I had a slightly different experience. I came
Tell
in...
it a different way,
I
Gav.
did,
Come
okay,
on.
I'll try and... I'm sure I embellish it every time. So, I came to court, so I didn't know what I was going to be doing, obviously, so I turned up and I was told, well, there's a couple this was how casual call was. Oh, there's a couple of games you could work on. You could work on this game called Tomb Raider that's going to be a 3D thing, and it's going to be, I don't know, and there's going to be this other game, Swagman, that's going to be a kind of 2.5D, he called it. I can't remember, it was just Adrian or whoever. Go and talk to this guy, Toby. He'll tell you about the first one, then you can talk to the other guys in the afternoon. So I go and meet Toby, who just hit me with this spiel. As I remember it, we couldn't get into the meeting room being used, so he sat me. We just sat on the stairs in court, and he just hit me with this. It's going to be like this. It's going to be like a movie. And I was thinking, what are you talking about? It sounds mad. Okay, fine. I'm the new boy. I'll just nod. They took me to the room, and there was like Heather and about Paul and about one other person, I think. Sat in this tiny room. It's like, oh, so we're going to build this thing with this tiny group of people. Sounds very unlikely. So that was my thing. But then I saw, it's kind of been interesting, all the different things that have surfaced over the years. You know, there's been like the original, you know, Ash sat managed to get that demo that was, you remember, your first level that's really, you know, so there's all sorts of artifacts, but that video that we kind of refer to of that girl running down the corridor in a kind of, it was just a pre-rendered thing, which she looked a bit more like Tank Girl in that one. That was the thing he showed me. This is what it's going to look like, you know, and you sort of got like this 3D character that had been pre-rendered running down a corridor and then turning, looking and turning, going down another corridor. That's the way I remember it anyway. But it all seemed super ambitious. And then Heather showed me what she'd got on her computer, which was just these massive lines like the Matrix. And it's like, okay, what's that? And then I went, okay, great, what am I doing? Well, we need someone to do the backgrounds and do all the enemies. Okay. And what's working at the moment? Well, Paul's got a model of Lara coming out of the art package. Look, you can turn it on the screen. It's like, this is never happening, you know. That was my opinion of it to start with. I just thought, this is hopeless. But never mind. It sounds really cool, and I'm apparently going to get paid to have a go at this, so what the heck?
Exactly. And what about you, Peter?
Well, I remember when I first joined, there was a bit of, let's have another look around the office again, and then, right, you're going to sit here. And I was in a room with Richard Morton and a guy called Craig Davison. I think Jason Goslin as well was in the same room, and he said, yeah, you're going to work on this Zorro game. 2 days later, yeah, we're not doing that Zorro game because we've got the license to the wrong thing. It was not the license to the cool new film with Antonio Banderas. It was an old black and white thing. It's like, oh, this is going to be shit. So, due to, I think, to a slight administrative error in a licensing discussion, I think that project sort of got on hold. But I was quickly moved on to another project with Andy Sandham and Dan Scott, which is called Bland Machine Head, and I think I worked on that for about 8 months. And at the backdrop of that, you know, I used to see the kind of crazy amount of paper that was in. There was more paper in that room that you were in than people. You know, like there were so many drawings everywhere, spread around. There wasn't time to put them on the wall. I think it was just, they were just spread out and all done in green registration pencil for like animation style of all this world. And I was like, there's storyboards for how the whole thing works and all this other stuff, because I guess Toby had started with this thing in his head, but with not the tools to make it, because obviously people needed to turn up and write the tools to actually make the game. So it was just this overwhelming impression of, and obviously talking to you, of we're doing all these things, but we don't know how we're going to do it. And then gradually seeing it take shape from just being able to spin Lara around in a program and put textures on her, to then, look, she's running on a flat plane. And I think it was when we saw her just running on a flat plane, and we're just going, this is going to work now, because you could control it with the keys, and she was running around.
Yeah, that was about 2 weeks after I arrived that Paul got an animation out and then just made her run. It was like on a big checkerboard.
And I think it's just, we're so new to the world of, as you know, as consumers as well as game developers, we just hadn't really seen 3D games with a character running around in 3D at that point. And so we were just so excited by that stage that you could see the possibilities. But obviously after years of game development experience, I realised that thing about making a character play an animation and run around is actually really gives you that sense of false progress that you realise there's a ton to do to get from that step to the next step. And I think that was the bit that was the big leap. So it was that, because I felt like at the time there was a lot of disbelief from people who'd come from sprite-based games that you could actually do this, and can we prove it would work and it would be fun? And I think in my mind I just kept thinking, well, it's Prince of Persia and that worked in 2D, so if you can make the character run around in 3D, you probably can do that. But yeah, it was an amazing feat just with the number of people who were there to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably good for you, Daryl, because less people to find, really. So, you know, you speak to all these amazing people.
Yeah.
How do you construct the narrative of that? Because everyone, it was 25 years ago, everyone's got probably a different version of events. Like, how did you go about even doing that, like making it cohesive, I guess?
Yeah, that was the main challenge of the book. I mean, I've said this before, but I mean, this is a book I've wanted to do for almost like 10 years, really, ever since I started writing. And I've always kind of had a rough idea of how I would do it anyway. And when it got to the interviews and I was transcribing all of them, you know, I wanted to, you know, just really focus in on the story of the first two games, not talking about, you know, the ports, the expansion packs, the anniversaries, just how the first two games were made. So that was the main narrative structure. And I just knew what the chapters were. I don't know how or why, I just knew what the 11 chapters would be. And I just got on with it in 9 months. And it was a matter of just transcribing the interviews that I did with everyone, but making sure that they were just coherent, really, and just told a coherent story over across 11 chapters.
Well done for doing that. Because even when we're together, you know, it's just human nature. You've got your own memories.
You've got your own
concept of
I
how
said
it
that
went.
earlier. So if you've got
When you get 5 people, try and remember something that happened 25 years ago.
I think the scariest thing is actually every so often the things turn up that I go, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, that great big bird thing that's in the second one that Joss made. I'd erased that from my memory. I had erased that, and then I saw a video and went, oh no, that thing.
It was
I was
like
expecting it to be like a hawk.
Which
I was expecting it to be like a hawk, and he made a man in a chicken suit, and I just went, okay.
Yeah, there wasn't any rules. Trust me. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't want to dwell on sort of sadder things, but you managed to get Troy Morton in there, obviously before he passed away, because he was quite keen on coming to the event as well. So that was a bit of obviously a shock for everyone. But what was it like, I guess, talking to him, because he had that different, I guess with Susie as well, a different perspective. So talking about it from the production side of things and the marketing. So how was that like talking to Troy?
Yeah, so I talked to him 3 times, middle of last year. And it was just great just how humble he was about everyone. I mean, he said nothing but good things about like yourselves and everyone else on the team, and just said that how it was just a team effort, but like a family effort as well. You know, everyone was just kind of stuck together, knit together, and there for each other as well. And you know, if like you wanted food or pizza or anything, he would go out and arrange it and make sure it was there.
It was like a family get together. I mean, you worked the long hard hours, but everybody made it easier.
Yeah, and Troy just kind of
he was the guy.
Yeah, he just really kind of like just showed me, just in 3 conversations, just how much he cared for, you know, the team, the game, the community, you know, everything now. And yeah, it's such a massive shame, but I just don't really want to kind of like say, you know, it is a shame, because it's a celebration really of how much he was involved in as well. And his contribution in the book as well is really nice as well.
Fantastic.
So yeah, it's really great.
Yeah, it does really complement the sections and just give you that additional layer.
Yeah.
I guess there's many layers to the tales you tell in the story. I mean, what was a highlight for you making this book?
The highlight?
You can name one. We'll find out more later.
I think, to be honest, I mean, obviously, like I grew up Tomb Raider as well. I mean, my first like experience was with the demo 1 disc, and it was Tomb Raider 1 with the 2nd level. Like, oh god, there's a bear. What do I do? Oh, you shoot with a shotgun. Oh, okay. And it was like the highlight of just talking to everyone who was involved. You know, because you know it was part of my childhood, and it's part of like what inspired me to do this book in the first place and write. You know, so that was the highlight. The fact I could talk to a lot of people who just still have so many fond memories of it, really. And it was great to have that come across in the book.
Yeah, something which you mentioned earlier, Heather, which I think we'll expand on that, is the Broom editor, which you made, Gavin. Just how much did that change the project? Because reading the book, it sounds like it was quite, like you say, how are we going to do this? And that was the game changer. Like, that comes in, and it was possible to make this game. So just, I guess, talk a little bit about that, and I guess we can talk about how it really helped you.
I mean, obviously that's my perspective because I made it. But no, I think it did feel, even when, Pete's talking about where the characters were running around, that was nice to see, but there was still this issue. You were trying to build stuff in 3D Studio, and it wasn't obvious how on earth we were going to get it to work. And it's just, I played Ultra Underworld, which is, I don't know, most people probably haven't played it, but it was one of the very first 3D games. It was a 3D dungeon game, and they built the world using a kind of blocky editor, which apparently I'd somehow played and gone, wow, it took me a while to realise that's what they'd done. I mean, it's blindingly obvious if you look at it nowadays, but, we were new to the idea of 3D graphics back then and naive. But anyway, so I said to Toby, I've got this idea. If we made it out of kind of, I can imagine how you could raise and lower the blocks and make a room like that. Fortunately, he'd also played Ultra Underworld, so he was like, yeah, I could see that. And it also, for him, it meant him going, and then, because of course the whole Prince of Persia thing, he went, and that means then I could define all the animations in terms of jumping this far, jumping that far. And Paul was like, and I think I can, because he was wondering how the hell he was going to make this character interact with this world, because we're running on ancient PCs, so they've got no computing power. And it's like, but with a grid, that's not too bad. That's a simple calculations. We could probably do that. So it kind of all came together, and then we started building that tool, and you guys were instantly able to go, this is 50 times easier than trying to do it in 3D Studios.
So much more than 50 times easier, Gav. It was like the God moment. It really was. The thing is, what you've got to remember is the complexity of something like 3ds Max takes a long time to create something that's not a lot. And just having sort of that, you could touch the editor and instantaneously you were creating from a square block. You were extruding faces and walls and pulling up floors and making something look more like a rock. But the thing is, from its very early beginnings, is the way that it was constantly pushed as well between myself and Neil. Whatever Gavin had given us was like we were always adding to. The poor guy never got to finish the room editor. I think it was probably never ever finished when we even passed the end.
That's the other story. Was that, of course, I also wrote it on the basis it was a tomb, and I'd been to Egypt, so I'd been in actual tombs, and I knew they were kind of very blocky. So, hey, that's obviously what we're building, right? And that's kind of what the concept art looked like and things. And then the moment you guys got it, literally, instantly I went, so you can connect up rooms with doors. And I just went, yes, so if I make the entire wall a door, and that one a whole door, and the ceiling a whole trapdoor, then I could put 6 rooms together and make a pyramid. And it's like, no, it's just meant to be little rooms.
It was fun pushing the editor. We used to break it regularly. There was the bug fixes that were going on, and a lot of people don't realise that when you've got a new piece of technology. Is that the bug fixing's going on at the same time that we're building. So we're building something and breaking the editor and then shouting at Gavin and going, Gav, I've just made this slope. Well, you're not supposed to, kind of thing.
I wasn't like
Why were you doing that? No, it was much more constructive. I am joking. You were very amicable. It would be like, Gav, can we just? We were very polite and to be honest, you accommodated most of the crazy ideas.
I think actually the way it worked is you guys used to ask for stuff. I went, no. And then I'd go away and go, if I could do that, what about this? And we'd do that instead.
It really was.
And so I guess, Peter, your cutscenes, were they used in the editor, or was that completely separate?
It'd be completely separate. It's at that time as well, because it was a disc-based game, the idea was that things would be video-based, although we had real-time cutscenes as well that Toby worked on. So it kind of gave you that little bit of detachment in the sense that we try and mirror things like, say, Lara's house and try and represent what it might have looked like from the outside, for example, or then things like the Lara's vision where she first gets 2 pieces of the ski on and puts them together. It's like, well, I think Gavin would have had a heart attack if we tried to do that in the editor. So you could see that at that time in game development, the cinematics being made pre-rendered meant that you had much more creative freedom and you could do something that wasn't possible, whereas obviously, say 5 or 10 years later, that wasn't really a valid reason anymore that you could do more in. But at that time, I wouldn't say it was like a USP, but it was an expectation as games had moved to CD that there should be some sort of video, and it was, I guess, not a buzzword, but it was a thing that was popular at the time, and people used to get excited about the fact that there were these cinematic pieces in all games at that moment.
So in terms of, for you, Daryl, what were the biggest revelations for you? Not too many spoilers, maybe up to chapter 6 we can spoil. But yeah, so for you, like, you know, you stood looking at both of these games. There must have been some things which shocked you, or, you know, sort of the rumours managed to clear up a few things, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I don't want to spoil the entirety of what I found out, but I think it just kind of amazed me just how much of how Lara kind of like came into her own, with thanks to Vicky and Susie and the team as well. I didn't realise just how much, you know, like so much of the depth of Lara that was already in that first game already, thanks to the scripts, thanks to the story, and it just kind of like almost kind of like just turned into its own thing, really. I mean, it just turned into, you know, this Lara Croft, this sassy Lara Croft, which is fantastic for the mid-90s. And yeah, it just came into its own. And there are some discoveries that I made, like after chapter 5, but it's just the fact that I wanted everyone to have their time to shine, really, essentially, to just showcase like who was responsible for what in their own words as well on a blank canvas. I think that was great.
Yeah. And I mean, I've got a couple of things I've wrote down. Just so if I said to you, The Wizard of Oz, what does that mean?
What does that mean, Gav?
So you've got to remember now what you said.
Yeah.
What have I said?
So it was the cheat code.
Yes. So yeah. On the Tomb Raider, that was my cheat code, because I think that's on the PC, not on the PlayStation.
Know that.
Yeah,
Learn something again.
I made it so that I didn't like these cheat codes that were just some random sequence. So I made it so you turn around on the spot 3 times, jump forward, jump backwards, and it was meant to be Dorothy at the end of The Wizard of Oz going home, where she's spinning around going, take me back, or whatever. And that was just the idea that something you could just do in the game, an actual move that you weren't likely to actually trigger by accident, but would then, you know, trigger the cheat code.
Yeah, and there's little things like that. Chaos Raiders.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Chaos Raiders.
Yeah, so they are the henchmen, Atlas henchmen, and the Chaos Raiders, and Paul like made sure to mention that like repeatedly. And to be honest, I'd love to see that in a new like spin-off game, really, Chaos Raiders. I think it'd be really great. But yeah, that is just gives the context of the enemies, and I just find it really interesting of how much it's a parallel between Tomb Raider and Chaos Raiders. Really, I think it's really great.
And I guess another thing which you cover is like what could have been, like the things which didn't necessarily make it into the game. Want to discuss those a little bit?
Yes, I mean, like the dynamite, for instance. You know, the overhead map as well that was in the ring style as well. You know, just those like little things that just kind of like really made you think like what could have been. Really, it was really interesting with the first one. I mean, not sure if you want to carry on with that.
What, the maps? Yeah, that was Jason. He spent ages, didn't he, making a 3D map for the game. I don't know if you even remember it.
Vaguely remember, Jason.
That was what the compass did, I think, originally. It was supposed to do that, and it opened up this thing, but we realised it just gave away the whole level, because you could just see suddenly the whole structure of the level in boxes, and it was like, oh, okay. So we didn't do it, and then towards the end of it, I thought, we've still got this compass, I know, I'll just make the needle point north. I'm sure everyone used that all the time, right?
And is there anything, I guess, for yourselves, like, is there anything, other cut content which you sort of, we wish we got in, or do you think it's perfect, it can't be improved upon, those games?
You'd have ideas for doing things that you couldn't accommodate in the game. Like, for instance, I remember I've got lots of sketches of ideas that you've got, certain little scenarios that Lara could be in on a level. One of them, for instance, was the Venice levels. I've got a sketch of, I wanted Lara to drop off the roof of a building and catch some shutters, and then the shutters breaking and her being able to drop and catch another set of shutters. But you've got to remember there'd be specific codes for those little intricacies that you might only use maybe once in a level. And that was key to Tomb Raider, is that you've got to try and get rid of all that, because you need to get this game done in a time frame, and you can't have all these little intricacies taken care of.
So you kind of adapt that to, well, okay, she's not going to jump off, she's going to slide onto a canopy, because a canopy is something that I can build now without having going back to Gav or going back to Paul and getting specific animations done, and I'll get the same sense. So you were always trying to adapt your initial cool, funky ideas of all these ways of Lara interacting with the map into something that you could physically build and get running without hassling the programmers constantly. But we always allowed for a big final level boss type event, didn't we? Which was all specifically coded, so you'd have, the moment when Lara stood on the golden hand of Midas, wasn't it? And she turned gold. So that's specific coded. But for the rest of the games on both Tomb Raider 1 and 2, you had those rules of what Lara could do within her environment, and as an artist you could make slight variations of that, but you tried to stick by those rules.
Anything for you, Peter?
I can remember, I think one of my first moments of just looking at something Neil was doing, and I think it was at the beginning of when he'd not been there, or not been on that project for very long, and he was working on a cinematic location that then never actually got used, and it was a docks. And I don't know if it was Havana or something, I can't remember where it was, but I just remember seeing the scene, and and it looked very interesting. It was this room in a hotel and an outdoor bit, and you're just thinking, oh wow, yeah. And even at the time, it was all forgotten very quickly because we just carried on and did other stuff.
To be honest, I think the reason Neil ended up making levels was because he got so pissed off with Toby, he kept changing the bloody story until Vicky turned up and went, no, we're doing this. And then it got pinned down, but he kept. Neil spent the first 4 or 5 months making FMVs that never got used, one bit after another, and he went, I'm going to join Heather and just use this thing, and I've got ideas, and he built levels after that. So,
I mean, Judith as well, you in terms of script-wise, I guess you recorded lots of scenes, and there are things missing, I guess, in things like Tomb Raider 3, I may be jumping the gun a bit, but do you realise that there's some audio which wasn't used in that game?
Not that I can remember. I really can't remember. I did so many different takes of things, and then Vicky would change things as well. So we'd try different things. But I can't actually.
It's interesting. You've had a couple of mentions of Vicky. I mean, you should probably write an article which is where in the world is Vicky Arnold, because no one, that seemed to be a bit of a problem.
Yeah, the biggest challenge, yeah. I mean, I spent months, pretty much the entirety of making the book in finding Vicky, and it was just days of going through social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, asking you guys and everyone. I got to the point where I thought, is she even real? Is she just a pseudonym or a pen name?
Yeah. It's actually me.
Yeah, it's Gavin. And it wasn't until Nathan sent me a picture that, it's actually a person, and it's Vicky, okay. But yeah, I just couldn't find her at all. So
she's here.
She could be here right now. Yeah,
you wouldn't know.
Make her entrance. But yeah, definitely. That's the main challenge really of the book. But she worked with Susie, and Susie's in the book, so I feel like all was not lost there.
Yeah. What was it like working with her? I guess.
I can say it was, for me, Vicky obviously was like a filter for some of Toby's ideas as well, in terms of narrative structure and where things could go, and the practicality of obviously writing dialogue's really hard. I've had a go at it myself, and I sucked at it, but it was one of those things where she was really good at. We're very conscious about, we don't want to spend too much time away from the game, so you've got to be really concise in what you're doing, but we also have to think about scope as well, because there's that horrible challenge in making games about you've got time and you're trying to achieve quality, so you have to think about what are we going to do with that time that we've got to make the best thing we can. So we'll say, maybe there shouldn't be 100 people in this room when Lara comes through. Maybe we'll show it like this, or maybe it'll be nighttime, Vicky, or we'll change. So we change things around, and a bit like the Jeep chase in Tomb Raider 2 in the snow at nighttime, she kind of gave me a lot of free rein of, your idea is really cool and it's given me all of these ideas, but I think we should do it this way because this is really practical. And so it was great, and Vicky was so amenable in that sense. Whenever we worked with things, she just said, well, this is what's important in the story, you tell me what's the best way that you could visualize it, that you'll get it done. And a lot of the time it's like, well, we need to do this in about 4 weeks, so we need to think very smart about that. And that was the really fun part of working with Vicky, is she was just nothing was a problem in that sense.
Yeah, and I guess you worked with her as well.
Yeah,
She
I
gave you a
think
bit
it was
of,
very much, she had like, from what I can remember, she gave Lara a life. Like she knew what her favourite film was from her point of view, if you get what I mean. And you know, about animal rights, that kind of thing went around because of the shooting of the animals or something. And yeah, she kind of gave her a backstory. I don't know if it was just Vicky. I'm not quite
No,
sure.
I think she pinned it down a bit more. I think
Yeah.
Toby was a bit all over the place initially. He
Yeah,
didn't
and I
quite
think
know what
Vicky's
her.
sort of like,
He didn't
this
think
is-
anybody was interested really, and he used to say things like, if somebody said, who does Lara Croft want to marry, he'd say, I'm Brian Blessed.
Yeah, he did. He just made out a lot of things. She was far more tank girly when he was trying to make her up. She was kind of a little bit unhinged and crazy, and Vicky made her, well, what she is.
Slightly unhinged and crazy.
Well, yeah, I suppose.
a bit less.
A bit less.
Still goes around murdering people, but, you know, don't worry about it. Yeah, I mean, let's talk about, I guess, events. A lovely event here, but E3, for example. Like, I know, Judith, you mentioned it slightly earlier, but you did go to an E3 and you did the virtual Lara, where you had to...
when I was in the cupboard.
When you were in the cupboard speaking to people. So we sort of had that, but I guess, did you guys go to any of these big, like ETS?
Well, we weren't allowed out of the office, so we just.
This went have a go as well, actually.
We did.
Who else went?
We got really drunk at the E3. That's why I can't remember it. Because I met guys
I thought
from
it was
Rare.
easy.
ECTS, that's where you had that photograph.
I told you I was drunk. I didn't even know where we were.
And then I
Yeah, that's
I
right.
swapped your hair onto Jeremy's head.
That's
remember?
right, yeah. We were a very classy bunch, weren't we?
Yeah, that was ECTS. Yeah, that was
Sorry,
in
it
London.
was. E3 was the... was that
That's the one in
Atlanta.
America.
I went to Atlanta. The Atlanta one.
Didn't you go to the E3? No? Were you invited? I think we were all invited and then for some reason we didn't go.
I think
Well, I
Jeremy
obviously didn't get that invite
The
then.
Venice trip and the Egypt trip that we were all
No,
going on.
that was towards the end of Tomb Raider 1. They had a big. Susie took a whole bunch of games journalists on a jolly off to Egypt, and
Nice.
we just got all these pictures of them all having things like, great.
I mean, that's the problem is a lot of that stuff, the timing of those things always happens when you're either trying to submit a game or you're
Yeah.
approaching alpha or something like that, and the idea of any of the dev team leaving their desks for anything other than going to the toilet is frowned upon, I think. Well, it certainly was in those days.
Yeah, I did some quite strange things. Like I went to, I think it was Berlin, to be interviewed with David Bailey, the photographer, and it was done in blue screen those days, you know. So I was sitting in the chair, and then they put Lara in my place and had headphones on and stuff like that. And we had a full script, and we sat down to do it, and he just was asking the most obscure, disgusting questions that it was just. So I
You were
can't.
put on the spot and
Yeah, I
something
was
like
really
that. It'd
put
have
on
been
the spot.
embarrassing.
So, but they were pleased with what I answered them back without telling them to, you know.
You really had to have your wits about you. If you
Yeah,
asked
and we went to
something,
France,
yeah.
went to Montpellier, and I can't even remember what we were doing there. I've got pictures of us sitting around tables and smoking when we were allowed to smoke inside and writing notes, but I can't really remember what we did, in there.
I think the dopiest thing I did was actually going on holiday to China while we were making Tomb Raider 2 without actually thinking,
I'll
I
take
could
some photos.
go to Jez and say, I need to do this as a kind of research trip, will you pay? So I just went on holiday to China and
Yeah, and I really...
stood on the Great Wall and I'm wearing a t-shirt of Lara, knowing that no one knew why I would be wearing a Lara t-shirt
Well,
on the
me and
Great
Neil
Wall.
would have really appreciated the textures as well.
I know, I didn't do anything. I just went on holiday.
It was like, have you took any photographs? Me and Rachel. There's me and Rachel.
exactly.
Hey, where's the wall? Where's the
Yeah, I could have done,
textures?
I can also remember I did an interview with Crash Bandicoot,
Right.
and we had a fight scene, and so I had to do like
Wait
noises,
a second.
things like that.
Just,
So there was lots of different things that I did like that, but were never. They're probably in archives somewhere. You know, I did lots of stuff that just coming back into my head. That, oh yeah, I did that, and then maybe I do this.
they made the most of you.
Yeah.
Got you out, flying you all over.
No, it wasn't like that.
Now it's all. So, before we open up some questions, are we doing a second book? What's happening?
very
Tomb
direct.
Raider 3 and 4.
All
What's
the things
going
you
on?
found out. So it's like, here now.
I know, yeah.
Oh, shit.
And what do you think? I mean, this was quite an epic from the sounds of it to actually make the book. So, are you interested in covering different things? Because we talk about Angel of Darkness. There's so much content out there for it. Is there anything really to discuss further, or is there something else you'd like to complete change?
I think there's plenty of stories about Tomb Raider, and I mean the next obvious choice would be Angel of Darkness, but to be honest, I've always kind of seen it not as a book, but like a documentary really, or even like one of those Netflix miniseries, like 6-episode series. I think with Angel of Darkness that could work a lot better really, because we've seen that just before, like Steve's like incredible video, we've seen the community, Ash for example, and everyone else with all the content that they make, and you think, it's too big for a book. It wouldn't work. So
and Ash's guys are the new generation of Tomb Raider, the beginning of the new generation of Tomb Raider fans. In some degrees, we were quite culty, I think, with Tomb Raider 1, even though there was a big market for it. But by Tomb Raider 3, it was so established. There's a lot of people that played Angel of Darkness that never went back to Tomb Raider 1 and 2. That was the old games. It's nice that there's a revival in it now, that people are starting to look and play Tomb Raider 1 and 2. But then it was poo-pooed. That was the new game. Let's go with Angel of Darkness onwards, you know.
And I think that's the aim, like a documentary of Angel of Darkness and the book Tomb Raider 1 and 2. But there are other stories. I mean, I think like the expansion packs could be a good topic. The third game itself, I think, could be a good talking point as well.
Spin-offs, wasn't there? Anniversaries and.
Yeah, but at the minute there's no plans, but never say never. But
a game, I think any insight into how any of those earlier games, GTA for instance, I would read that. I'd like to know about the guys in Edinburgh. You know, they've been my stars for a long time.
It's an interesting one actually, because like yesterday was the 20th anniversary of GTA 3,
would have been,
and we've just seen the trailer for the definitive edition of all three. And it makes you think, like, just how much of an impact that game made in a 3D perspective as well.
I think that was the next point I was just going to make, really, was there was that other marker you could put down at the time of those head-turning games.
5 years later.
For me, it was GTA.
But so pretty much, Luke, never say never.
Never say never. We'll see. You'll find out next time. Okay, so I think we'll throw out some questions. Calm down, I'm not up yet, I need to get my mic. So while I do that, I'll ask you a question. What cool stuff did you keep? What have you got hidden in the cupboards?
I'm not saying.
You've not got a PS1 dev kit?
No, I don't.
You know, well, what did we have? You were raiding the skip when call fell and giving me the occasional trophy when I went to the skip, if you remember, Gavin.
I didn't go in the skip.
You went in the skip.
I went in that skip as well.
It's a shame I wasn't there.
We have artefacts, yeah. But not that many.
No, to be honest, most of the stuff just got thrown, didn't it? We signed a few posters for people, that was kind of a thing, but I think I've got a pair of scissors from Core, a couple of Lara mouse mats and maybe a beer mat. That's about mine.
I've got a lot of bits from Susie's office, so I've got all.
Good job, she's not here.
I've got all the cuttings, magazine cuttings and stuff from all over the world and stuff
I'd
like
like
that.
to see.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think we all collected our fair share of the odd magazine, especially if it was a British magazine. We've got those, and the Edges. They got a bit of publicity from the Edge. And they were quite a cool magazine to have on the side, weren't they?
Cool, so our first question.
So my question is for Heather, and I was just wondering, as a woman working in the gaming industry at the time, when there wasn't really many female characters, how did it feel for you knowing that you were helping create a game with a woman at the forefront?
So, I'm by no means a feminist, but it was just nice that Toby'd stuck by his guns and said, you know, because Jeremy at first did say, you know, no male is going to want to play a female character, and that was just the way it was at the time. And it was through Toby's sort of pedanticness, really. This is the only way it's going to work, this is what I'm seeing. And Jeremy was quickly won over. As soon as Lara was up and running on screen and he could see the potential of Lara and what a beautiful character she was, you know, we were okay, we could run with it then. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but as far as being a woman in the industry with men, I was always a bit of a tomboy anyway, so getting on with the guys was not a problem apart from Gav. But no, I don't think there was. It's funny because people often say something. Well, you were around when the Spice was going. It's all about girl power. Well, it wasn't really the case. There just wasn't that focus on feminism at the time. I was from kind of a very working class background where girls just ran around with boys, and you didn't see it as a them and us kind of situation. So I don't know. I might have been a novelty. I don't know.
Maybe the guys then were more feminist, because I thought it became pretty important to us that we had a female lead.
Yeah.
And late on in the project, I think it was France office came going, oh, can you put in that was maybe a French accent. Can you put in a male option? And it was like, well,
sure.
Partly no, we can't do that because we've got about 3 months left, but also by that point it's like, no, this is our character, she is great. So yeah, we knew we were doing something unusual and different by having a female character. So
I was very proud that we'd got a girl in there.
Hi, Tina here. So my question is for Kevin, Heather and Peter. Basically, how did you guys feel when Toby came back to work for Crystal Dynamics, reinvented Lara, and then, well, again worked on the reboot that was in 2013?
Controversy corner.
Tends to do that.
So obviously it was interesting after the game went to Crystal. It was, can't say we were super happy with this outcome. But I didn't, at the time we were fairly friendly with Crystal. We didn't see them as kind of, people talk about the rivalry between Core and Crystal, but they were just two studios, game studios. So we kind of went over and talked to them at one point, and they said, oh, we're getting Toby in. And I thought that was quite cool that they managed to persuade him to come back out, and get back involved with his character. Yeah, I'm not going to say anymore.
I'd already left Core at this stage, so I still had the nostalgia of the Tomb Raider 1 and 2 days working with Toby, and always regarded Tomb Raider as Toby's creation. So yeah, I can remember when I heard the news and I was like, yeah, Toby's back where he belongs. That's how I felt. I'd have loved it. I think we all felt the same when Toby left. We all tried to convince Toby to stay for Tomb Raider 2, and it was he had his own reasons for leaving and moved on, did his own thing. But I think there was more than enough room for Toby to continue to do Tomb Raider and maybe get more control over how Lara was advertised. If he'd have just stuck around a bit longer to find out, he'd certainly have had a little bit more pulling power by the time Tomb Raider 2 was released.
Yeah, I think for me, I was really surprised, for all the reasons of how, why he'd left originally to do his own thing, is, for that kind of feel of like loss of control of something he'd created. But I was also really happy as well, because I just felt like, he's had a go, and I can really just go and visit him when he was in Bristol with his own company there, and see him, Paul, and so it's just really exciting that. And the last time I went to see him and his partner at the time in Bristol, before he went to America as well, it was like, he was doing different things, and it's nice, that something had worked out, and people were still wanting him to do stuff. And I guess at that point, I knew he'd only be doing it if it was on his terms. So he's not doing it because he'd been forced to do it if he'd stayed in the company, for example.
I've got a question for the devs then. So the game comes out and everyone loves it, and did you I'm just interested to know what you think about it kind of changed the way people saw games, and 3D wasn't just like a gimmick or anything, and just wondering what you think after the game came out, how you saw the reaction to it and the way it changed how other games were made as well.
I think it was kind of interesting working on the first one, because people always ask that question about when did you know it was going to be a success and stuff. And I don't think we kind of knew that while we were working on it. We were so kind of wrapped up in it. We knew we were doing something kind of special, and it felt quite magical to work on. But it was only when right towards the end, it was the final E3 where they went out there and Troy came back with a video of the one computer they had it running on, surrounded by 6 layer deep of people, and it's like, cool. And then suddenly the magazine started going, we want, interviews, and it suddenly got exciting right at the end, and then it went out there and just kaboom, was suddenly a big deal, and it was just, wow, we just did this. This is.
It's funny how
cool.
you were talking about like the progression of other games coming out in 3D as well, because as Gav said, I remember that as well from the ECTS, and the company I previously worked for, Rare, were there. They were demoing something at the same time. I can't remember what it was. And it was actually one of the guys that I used to be friends with at Rare came up to me, and he was watching the Tomb Raider demo. So it was quite cool catching up, and it was quite cool that a fellow colleague had kind of said, oh, well done, Heather, because I'd been left a couple of years and not under the best terms when I left Rare. But he did mention to me, oh, we're doing a similar thing, and I think GoldenEye must have been either in production or around production at the same time as Tomb Raider. And looking at the timeline, I think GoldenEye was probably being developed alongside Tomb Raider, but for whatever technical issues, there was delays on them releasing the game. And it isn't until now that you can sort of think back and actually the two games could have or should have come out at the same time. It would have been really interesting to see, who'd have won the slot kind of thing. But I mean, it was kind of, I think everybody knew it was time for that change, that progression into a different form of gaming. I think we'd all had enough of platformer games and the 8-bit, the Marios, the Sonic the Hedgehogs. So I think a lot of development teams, as I say, brought up GTA earlier, but they were all kind of starting to ripple into the industry at that stage.
Yeah, I think what was really interesting is, although when you're looking at the game at the time in development, especially in those last few months, you could see how you could focus on the fun bit, but it was very much like you're experiencing the game in like little micro sort of sections. You were in a bubble because you're testing something. You didn't get that experience of that journey that people would have had when they actually play it properly. And as developers, you sometimes you're too close to that.
Yeah, it was spoiled.
But I think what happened was there was the amazing technical and gameplay achievement of making 3D platforming work and 3D combat work, which obviously is also super complicated. Well, work to the level that no one had ever done before.
Sort of work.
But the fact it was a very, very, very much a playable game. But I think the bit that we didn't really gauge was it's first of all it was the sense of immersion in the world, that you're exploring these places, because we knew what everything was and where it was, but people who were playing it blind, so they were experiencing it. But also it's that connection with the player, so that people were becoming invested in the character that they were playing, and it was those two things together, that they had the immersion and the investment in the character, that's what was a very different experience. And I think that narrative part of how it all fitted together, and then you had this umbrella of the fact that it was a 3D game as well, just made it like there was nothing else like it, I guess.
I think actually also, I do remember at the time, because there was quite a lot of 3D games starting to come out, but I felt something that we achieved on the original Tomb Raider that took quite a while for people to catch up with was the climbing all over the scenery. People going there, there's a new Tomb Raider climb, but they were still kind of running around a corridor, and it was like, yeah, but Lara can just climb up there and go up on that aqueduct, and you can't do that.
And we were forever adding new moves in as well as we were going along.
And that felt quite a differentiator for quite some time. Even now, you don't get many games where you can really... in fact, I've said this before, Lara is actually totally independent in those early games. You don't find invisible walls and stuff. When our QA hell was the fact that players could just go where they like, and if they could find a way of jumping a direction we didn't expect them to, they go, oh, we've shortcut your level. And obviously speedrunners have been finding glitches ever since and shortcuts all the way through. So Lara really she's totally independent in those games. She can go where she likes. The only thing constraining where she goes is you guys attempting to make the levels fit together in a way that stops her shortcutting.
Getting from there to there. And some of those levels were a nightmare.
Whereas,
Gaz mentioned the system level before, which I played to death, and then he picked it up in 10 minutes.
20 seconds. I ran in, went, key, clunk, out. I went, Heather, that's probably not right, is it? She just went, oh! And then that cost me 2 weeks of my life while I helped you try and make that work.
That was the flooding. We were trying to flood a room, and everything had to work.
The crocodiles. Why is a crocodile floating?
Next question.
The flying crocodiles. There was one point where they didn't realise the water had gone, so they were just flying through the air. It's like, no! Being attacked by flying crocodiles.
Hello. So my question was mostly to the devs, but also to Judith as well. How does it feel that to see something that you created that is essentially your baby and your original IP evolve into what it has become today, whether that's like with the movie franchises, the Crystal Dynamic games, the new reboot games, and then also on top of that, how do you feel it has, because the first games came out at such a pinnacle point in video games in general, so how does that make you feel that you were a part of the original creation?
Yeah, it's obviously cool. I mean, when we made it, the idea that I'd be sitting on a stage 25 years later still talking about it was just...
It's surreal, isn't it, even now?
But it's the weirdest thing about it is how much it's parallel to us now. You know, it's just something that's there, and I watch, you know, the new movies come out, and it's just... I know it's based on stuff that we did, and I know that if we had not done what we did, none of you would be sitting in this room talking to us. But it very quickly, it just seemed to go off on its own, and we weren't involved in it, and it's just... So it's been a little bit odd over the years that we haven't got any say whatsoever in where it goes or what happens to it. And obviously, we keep referring to Toby, but, you know, he did come up with the idea. You know, he essentially came up with the equivalent of a Batman or something, which is a pretty cool thing to have done, and walked away from it. And he's never had any, you know, you asked about Crystal, he never properly had control. I was kind of interested to see what he did when he went back. I don't know how much he was steering that. It seemed to me that they kept him in a room and he did bits, but I'm not sure about how much control he had over where they went with the game.
I'd love to see Toby interviewed,
Yeah.
without talking about anything to do with IDOS or anything to do with, you know, the marketing and the stuff that sort of upset him at the end, and just let him tell you what's going on in that crazy mind is.
Yeah.
Because he was quite an eccentric character anyway, Toby. One day.
Yeah, it just feels like 24 years for me, if you like, you know.
Yeah.
It's just, it's hard to put into words, actually. It's like, you know you were part of it, but it's such a long time ago. And then when you start talking about it, like today, because I've talked quite a lot, and I've had some fantastic, interesting questions, it's opened up things that I'd completely forgotten about.
Yeah.
And you know, from when I did Lara, she's just, as I think I said this before, she's to me, she isn't Lara, but
she's got her own life.
But she's got, she's just evolved. You know, it's just a completely different thing.
It's nice to think we were there at the beginning of the
Yeah. I mean, I know I wasn't there right at the very beginning, but to be a part of it, and when it was still in Derby and core design, it was pretty.
And it's kind of human nature as well to want to leave a mark on the world.
Yeah.
I've been here. It's very surreal life in general, that to feel like you've cast your hand in cement, sort of thing. That's a nice feeling to know that even an 18, my daughter there, who didn't know anything about Tomb Raider until we started doing all these things, and that mum was just mum and housewife. And then suddenly went, what? You did something that other people...
That was really funny. When Ash invited us all into Manchester, that was the first time we got together in ages for the 20th. And it did feel like no one cared about us, like who worked on the original games. And so it was kind of cool to, you know, honestly, that's the first time I'd ever met the fans at all, really.
Thanks to Ash.
And at the end of the talk, people came and started asking for our autographs. My son was there like, what? Dad, what's going on? I'm like, don't ask me, I'm just doing this.
It's amazing, isn't it, how fans can be so, I don't know, just so charming and just so, can I have your autograph, can I picture with you? It's just...
Mia said 10 minutes of them with you at home, and I'm never going to know you. Back to the real world.
I think for me, the most surreal or strangest part was at the time when it was actually happening, and it was becoming really, really popular. And lots of my friends, you know, you'd see, I used to live in Liverpool, and I'd go over and see them and go, oh, I've been playing this, or oh, you're working on another one. and they were getting so excited. They're just thinking, this is just bizarre, the way that this is happening. And then you'd be in the tube in London, and this train stops, and you're looking at the wall, not the side where the doors are opening.
Yeah.
And the Lara's face is literally looking at you, going,
yeah.
"This is mental." And then
Almost nightmarish at the
and
time.
then seeing
wasn't
adverts
it?
on, or there's a bus goes by with the Lucozade advert, and you're going, "This is just everywhere." And that was in Derby, seeing billboards with Lucozade, and you're just thinking, for us, we're still in that building on Ashbourne Road, and it was really hard to grasp that all of this was going on around us. And then you'll suddenly see, oh look, in Spain, I think Seat were doing a car advert with Lara being chased by a T-Rex. They're going, this is nuts, it's going on.
And that all happened really quickly after the
game. And then things
was
like,
recognised,
U2 were saying, oh, we're interested, we'd like some of Lara for our pop marks, or can you guys do something? And then things like, oh, for the, at the time, I think I was, don't know, maybe I thought I was cooler than I was, and I used to read The Face then. But being asked like by The Face, oh, can you do this over the? If you know you've got no time, can you do it over the Easter weekend? Do some art, but a cover for The Face. And I was going, this is mental. And so that was one of the things that I really wanted to keep. It's like, wow, that's, the magazine went, I suppose, after that. But it was just funny that it was in all the areas of your life that you were interested in. It just seemed to appear, and then a bit like as everyone else has said, it kind of had its own life, and we got on and did other things, and then it's just funny when it just keeps popping up, like the Angelina Jolie films, and then the more recent.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the film because we got to go to the premiere of the Angelina film do you remember, in Leicester Square? And we arrived there, and there's just crowds of people and
red carpet.
Yeah, limos turning up, and we're sort of standing in the crowd going, "How do we get in?" And we eventually realised, oh, you have to go in the bit where all the limos go in, and you have to walk down the red carpet. And so we sort of like, oh, and we were on the red carpet, and all the photographers just polishing their lenses and things. Because who were we? No one cared, because they didn't have a clue who we were. And then literally some limo turned up. I don't know who was in it, and the bouncers behind went, "Clear the carpet!" and pushed us into the thing. So that's how we entered the.
There was a model at the time. I'm trying to remember her name, but she was surrounded, wasn't she, by about 50 photographers.
Yeah, so it's just a weird thing.
Yeah. But that was surreal in itself, was going towards the cinema. And I can remember sitting there and going, God, this is so shit.
Yeah.
I wish they'd done it like one of Pete's FMVs. It would have been really cool if it was all animated.
Yeah. But then they got to the end, and
I
Angelina Jolie and all the rest.
I got excited when they were going to do it animated.
Yeah,
I'm going to voice it.
But I remember the one shot where Angelina was walking towards camera, and it looked like she'd got, those 60s bras with the cones. And there's a shot of her coming through the arc. She's like that, and I'm like, oh.
Next question.
Really? What they get away with in Hollywood.
Hello there. You talked earlier on about sort of like the sort of initial development work and the editor and sort of the process of putting that together. Obviously, as time's gone on, that editor has evolved and been released to the fan community. And I just wondered how you felt as a group about the legacy of the fact that that technology is still being used and evolved 25 years later. And have you had an opportunity to see any of the fan creations that have been done in the Tomb Raider level editor community?
Yeah, so I've had a look, and I think it's fantastic. And I'm a firm believer that give free tools anyway. I mean, granted, this was a game editor. It's had his day, really. Although I will keep getting it out, Gavin, and map out my new extension for the house on it.
You must have a pretty funky looking extension, I must say.
It's the project, it's the Eden project one now.
Thing. Oh my God.
But no, I'm a firm believer that give people free tools, let people be creative. One of my bugbears just lately, so this is slightly going off at a tangent, is companies like Adobe Photoshop, who once upon a time you could buy a CD and share technology and open the world for everybody to learn something, has now become this very, very tight, mean system where we've all got to pay lots of money to be able to teach ourselves how to use something. I think keep creativity free and enjoyable for everybody, personally.
Yeah, well done.
Well, you have got Blender for TV.
Blender, yeah.
So that's very good. I think,
I think it's really cool that, I'm assuming you maybe use it, but the idea that anyone's still using that editor 25 years later is mind-boggling. But it shows, if you have used it, I mean, I know it's obviously quite a different one. I think it's more or less been rewritten by people and stuff, but you get the gist of what I was trying to create back then was something super simple that anybody could use, even Heather. And that I achieved.
But the concept of how it works is very similar to something that I was working on with a level designer when he was making a tool in Unreal Blueprints that essentially did what you did about, I just want to make a hole here in the wall and make a door, and this is the quickest way, is just to click on the surface and go, I want this to be a door. I don't want to know about polygons, just want to move a wall. And so the concept is really sound, you know, even now. But great that those tools are out there for people to use, for sure.
So just curious how you guys feel when you hear that Crystal want to unify the timelines.
Oh, another controversial question.
I didn't know.
I don't care, actually. No. I'm going to be interested to see how the hell they do that, because it's going to get munged together in some interesting way. I imagine it'll essentially just be the modern Crystal game with a couple of references to things she might have done before those started. That's my guess, but I might be wrong.
One more question, I'm going to go to you. Let's be a good one.
Oh.
I'm joking.
Hi, I just want to take this opportunity to say to Judith, you're my favourite Lara Croft, and when I think of all the voices, you're the definitive version of her in my mind, and I just think you did a fantastic job in those
thank you very much.
2 and 3.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that.
Leading on to my question, why not, you know, like 4, what happened there? Did you say no? Did you?
No, when 4 came along, I had to re-audition because there was a young Lara. There was a young Lara and an old Lara, and they were going to do me as the normal Lara, sorry, and Janelle as the younger Lara. But then when I tried to do, then they said, you try and audition to be the young Lara as well. My voice was just too mature. So yeah, so it was passed on to the lovely Janelle.
I'm coming. Cool, so let's give a round of applause to